Hello again. I've already touched on the topic of giving when talking about generosity, and there will be more to come in the next session. But today I just wanted to focus on the question of tithing. Tithing and giving are often thought of as one and the same, but I believe that there is a marked difference in the two. So what is a tithe? There are a lot of passages in the Old Testament about tithing, and I must admit I do find them a little bit confusing at times, but I just want to work through some of the basic principles of what the tithe is all about. Now, a number of people often think of the tithe as a kind of a tax that is levied to pay for the upkeep of the temple and the staffing of the priests and the Levites. However, as I read the Bible, I see it as so much more than that. I see it as an act of worship. In an agricultural society, it's a true celebration and thanksgiving to God for all of his incredible blessing, for all of the increase that we receive, that people receive from the land. It isn't just about money, and certainly in Old Testament times it wasn't just about money, but it's about the increase of produce and livestock of all of our assets. I'm briefly going to refer to a number of passages in Scripture which you may need to go away and look up. In Numbers chapter 18, we read that the promised land was divided up amongst the tribes of the Hebrews, except the tribe of Levi, who were the family with the priests and the Levites. They weren't given a share of the land. They had no inheritance, but they were to serve God in the tabernacle and then in the temple. So they had no way of feeding themselves, so the tithe was brought to them to sustain them and their families. And in turn, they tithed off of that tithe to Aaron the priest. But he got only the very best parts. The rest, apart from that which was used to burn offerings, they ate and drank and used to celebrate. In Deuteronomy 14, there's an implication that for 2 years the tithes are eaten by the worshippers at the sanctuary, set aside by God together with the Levites. They weren't to be eaten at home, but they were to be eaten at a place of worship, emphasising that I think it's all about a celebration of worship. But in the third year, Deuteronomy 26 says that they are devoted at home to the Levites, orphans, widows and strangers. So I'm given to understand that since post-exilic times, this has been interpreted as a second or an additional tithe for the benefit of those that didn't have. It gets further complicated by instructions which say that if it's too far to travel to the sanctuary, then you can sell the tithe and buy whatever you want to eat and drink to your heart's content. Either way, it sounds like that whole theme of a great big celebration, which is so typical of Jewish community life. Leviticus 27 adds this. It says that a tenth of all that you have, crops, fruit and animals, of these the crops and fruit could be redeemed, so they could be bought back from cash. However, the animals could not be bought back. They had to be sacrificed. It then also talks about the first fruits. So the firstborn of the animals belonged to God and could not be bought back. And thereafter, every 10th one in the herd or the flock belonged to the Lord. Now, I don't want you to get confused by all the variations in practice. The principle here is, however they did or didn't actually practice these things, the bottom line is that the tithe literally belonged to God and not to the individual. You see, tithing is not giving because you can't give to God what already belongs to him. However, it would appear that for much of Israel's history, the practice of tithing wasn't fully observed. And in 2 Chronicles 31, Hezekiah restores the worship of God, and one of the things he reinstated in a big way was tithing. And he created storehouses in order for the tithe to be stored in. You know, that was the extent of Hezekiah's success, that they had an abundance of produce left over. So they created these storehouses, which then carried through to the time of Nehemiah, which you can read in Nehemiah 10:37. And again was reinstated by Malachi 3:10. Malachi actually brings quite a challenge to the people, and he says, "Will a man rob God? Yet you do rob me. You ask, how do we rob you? In tithes and offerings." And then he goes on to say that the nation is under a curse because they don't bring the whole tithe into the storehouse. They are not bringing the whole of the tithe into the sanctuary, into the place of worship, where they draw their spiritual well-being from. By the way, tithing is not just a thing about the law. It's not post-Moses, it was pre-Moses. Abraham, who lived long before the law was established, celebrated a great victory, as we read in Genesis 18, by tithing and actually sharing communion with Melchizedek. It says that Abram gave him a tenth of everything. Abraham simply reinforces in that concept that the tithe is a celebration of great thanksgiving, a genuine act of worship. We're not just called to worship God with songs or prayers, we worship him with all that we are and have. Now, whether you agree with the principle of tithing or whether you just prefer to give, I'm not going to argue with that one, but my point is, if the tithe belongs to God anyway, then you don't start giving until God gets more than 10%, which is actually something for us to think about. In practice, I realise that, if tithing is a new concept to you, then it's a big jump. I'm really glad that I learned to tithe before I started earning big money. It was easier to tithe when I only earned £500 a year, which I did at one point, to when I earned £500 a week. So you may need to take a run of it. But I just want to encourage you with the principle that tithing is what belongs to God. And then when we give over and above that, out of our heart. And that is it. It's not a law thing. It's all about the heart. Bless you guys as you ponder on these things. Bye for now.